I flew for 14 hours from Accra to Atlanta to see my first grandchild. I wore my finest Kent cloth, and my arms ached from the weight of the gifts I carried. They sent a text message after the flight landed. It's not a good time. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just a dismissal. They left me, their mother, stranded at the airport like a piece of lost luggage. They didn't know that the woman they deemed too embarrassing to be seen with was the very key to the life they dreamed of. They thought they were protecting their image. They were about to learn that when you deny your roots, you forfeit the entire tree. Before I begin, thank you for being here. For being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, then you are in the right place. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It truly means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Ama Asante, and my life is woven from threads of brilliant color and unyielding strength. In the bustling markets of Accra, my name is spoken with respect. I am the founder and matriarch of Asante Textiles, a company I built from a single dusty loom in my father's courtyard into an international exporter of authentic high-end Kente and Adire fabrics. I am a businesswoman. I have negotiated with buyers from London and Tokyo, my mind as sharp as the patterns my weavers create. I am a guardian of my culture, a woman who has taken the art of her ancestors and given it a place on the world stage. I am a CEO, a community elder, and a widow. But the title that has always mattered most, the one that resides in the deepest chamber of my heart, is Mother. My daughter, Naomi, is my one great vulnerability, my most beautiful and complex creation. From the time she was a little girl, I saw a fire in her, an ambition that was too big for our world. She did not want to learn the loom. She wanted to conquer a different kind of world, one she saw in magazines and on the flickering screen of a television. She wanted the sleek, modern, fast-paced world of America. And so I gave it to her. I poured the profits from my textile business into her education. A bachelor's degree from Howard, an MBA from Duke. I funded her American dream with Ghanaian Sadie, each tuition payment a thread of love and sacrifice woven across an ocean. She was brilliant and she succeeded. She became a high-level public relations executive for a luxury brand in Atlanta, Georgia. She married a man named David, an American who worked in private equity, and together they built a life that looked like a page from one of the glossy magazines she used to covet. When she told me she was pregnant, my joy was a physical thing, a warmth that spread through my entire being. My first grandchild. A new thread in our family's tapestry. A child who would be born on American soil but who would have the soul of Ghana, a soul I was determined to help nurture. From the moment I heard the news, I began to prepare for my journey. This would not be a simple visit, it would be a pilgrimage. I went to my weavers, the finest in Ghana, and commissioned a special Kent cloth for the baby, a small, soft blanket woven in a pattern that told the story of our family's lineage. I selected the finest, softest cottons and spent my evenings stitching small baby clothes, my hands, more accustomed to ledgers and contracts, rediscovering the gentle rhythm of a needle and thread. I went to the women in my home village and procured jars of the purest, unscented shea butter, a blessing for a newborn's skin. I packed these treasures with the care of a museum curator. A week before my flight, I shipped a large box ahead of me to their address in Sandy Springs, a suburb of Atlanta. It was filled with the larger gifts, a small hand-carved stool, more clothes, bolts of beautiful fabric to decorate the nursery. My own suitcase contained the most precious items, the Kent blanket, the first little outfit I had sewn, and a small beaded bracelet for Naomi, a traditional piece meant to protect a new mother. The 14-hour flight from Accra to Atlanta was a journey through memory and hope. I thought of Naomi as a little girl, her laughter echoing in our courtyard. I thought of the immense pride I felt at her university graduations, her success a validation of my own life's work. And I dreamed of the moment I would finally hold my grandchild. I would look into that tiny face and see the future of the Asante line. I would wrap the baby in the Kent cloth, a tangible connection to the ancestors, to the land, to the vibrant, powerful culture that was his or her birthright. As the plane began its descent over the sprawling, unfamiliar landscape of Georgia, my heart was a drum of anticipation. I smoothed the wrinkles from my finest Kent wrap, a beautiful cloth of gold and green, ensuring I looked every bit the regal matriarch arriving to welcome a new generation. I was Ama Asante, and I was coming to meet my grandchild. The moment I stepped off the plane at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, I was a splash of vibrant, unapologetic color in a world of muted tones. My Kent cloth, woven with the stories of my people, felt like armor. My head was held high, my posture regal. In my hand I clutched the gift bag containing the small, precious blanket and the first handmade outfit. I was a queen arriving to greet the new prince or princess. I followed the signs for international arrivals, my eyes scanning the crowd of waiting faces beyond the customs gate. I looked for my daughter's familiar face, for my son-in-law's tall frame. I imagined their smiles, the hug, the happy tears. The crowd was a sea of strangers, their faces a blur of anticipation as they found their loved ones. One by one they paired off, embracing, laughing, disappearing into the vastness of the airport. Soon the crowd thinned. The welcoming area grew quiet, and I was still standing there, alone. My smile began to feel stiff, frozen on my face. A knot of confusion, tight and cold, began to form in my stomach. Perhaps they were caught in traffic. Atlanta traffic, Naomi had always told me, was terrible. I found a bench and sat down, placing the gift bag carefully beside me. I waited. 10 minutes turned into 30. 30 minutes turned into an hour. I pulled out my phone and called Naomi. The call went straight to voicemail. "Naomi, my love, it is your mother," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I have arrived safely. I am waiting for you just outside the international arrivals gate. Please call me." I called David. His phone too went straight to voicemail. The knot in my stomach tightened into a fist of pure dread. An airport employee, a kind-faced woman in a blue uniform, approached me. "Are you all right, ma'am?" she asked, her eyes full of a pity that made my skin prickle. "Are you waiting for someone?" "My daughter," I said, my voice sounding small and foreign in the cavernous hall. "She is coming." The woman nodded, but her eyes said she didn't believe me. She looked at my traditional dress, at my bags, at my hopeful, anxious face, and I could see the story she was telling herself. A story of a confused old woman, stood up by her family. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread up my neck. After another hour of waiting, of my calls going unanswered, I knew I could not stay there any longer. I was a spectacle of abandonment. With a heavy heart, I collected my suitcase from the baggage claim carousel, which was now still and empty. I stood under the flickering fluorescent lights, the last passenger from my flight, a solitary island in a sea of indifference. Just as I was trying to figure out how to find a taxi, my phone buzzed. A text message. It was from Naomi. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. They were here. They were just late. I opened the message, my hands trembling slightly. The words on the screen were not a greeting. They were not an apology. They were a dismissal, as cold and as impersonal as the polished airport floor. "Things are too hectic right now. Maybe try again next year." I read the message once, twice, a third time. The words did not change. They did not soften. Hectic. Try again next year. There was no, "I'm sorry, mother." There was no, "There's been an emergency." There was just a slammed door, delivered via text message. I stood there, my suitcase at my feet, the precious gift bag in my hand, and the full weight of what had just happened crashed down on me. I had flown for 14 hours across an ocean, my heart filled with a lifetime of love. And my welcome, my greeting, my place in my daughter's life, had been reduced to 10 callous words on a tiny screen. I had to get out of there. I stumbled towards the taxi stand, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I asked the driver to take me to a motel, a cheap one near the airport. I had not planned for this expense. Most of my travel money was in the form of traveler's checks, meant for gifts and treats for the family. The motel was a dingy, soul-crushing place. The paint was peeling and the air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and disinfectant. The man at the reception desk looked at me, at my magnificent Kent cloth, now feeling like a foolish costume, and his eyes were full of a weary suspicion. He assumed I was homeless, a displaced person with no one and nowhere to go. And in that moment I felt like he was right. I paid for a room with the last of my American cash, my hand shaking as I counted out the bills. I had never felt so alone, so utterly erased in my entire life. The motel room was a small beige box of despair. The bedspread was thin and scratchy, the single window looked out onto a crumbling brick wall, and the silence was absolute. I sat on the edge of the bed, my suitcase and gift bag on the floor beside me like artifacts from a shipwreck, and I let the first wave of grief wash over me. It was a physical pain, a deep, tearing agony in my chest. I had been dismissed. I had been deemed an inconvenience, a problem to be handled with a curt text message. My first instinct was to call my sister Adwoa back in Accra. I needed to hear a loving voice, to be anchored by the sound of my own language. The call connected across the ocean, across the time zones, and when I heard her voice, a sob I didn't know I was holding back escaped me. "Amma, what is it? What is wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp with alarm. I told her everything. The long flight filled with hope, the lonely wait at the airport, the cold, cruel words of the text message. I told her I was in a motel alone. Maybe I don't belong in her life anymore, Adwoa," I whispered, the words tasting like poison. "Maybe the woman I am is not the kind of mother a successful American woman wants." "Do not say that." My sister's voice was fierce, a lioness defending her cub. "You are Amma Asante. You are a queen. This is not about you. It is about her. It is about the weakness in her spirit that America has watered. You stay there. You hold your head high. You remember who you are." Her words were a balm, a small, flickering candle in my vast darkness. We spoke for a long time, and by the time we hung up, the raw, open wound of my grief had begun to be stitched together with the tough, resilient thread of my pride. The next day I tried to find a reason, an explanation for Naomi's actions. Perhaps there had been a medical emergency with the baby. Perhaps something terrible had happened and she hadn't known how to tell me. I clung to this desperate hope. I called the local shipping office to track the large package of gifts I had sent ahead. "Yes, Mrs. Asante, we have the package here," the clerk said. "It was returned to us this morning." "Returned?" asked, my heart sinking. "Was there a problem with the delivery?" "No, ma'am," the clerk replied. "The delivery was attempted yesterday. The residents refused the package." Refused. The word was a punch to the gut. They hadn't just been too hectic to pick me up. They had actively refused my gifts. They had seen a box from Ghana, a box from me, and they had turned it away. The hope I had been nurturing shriveled and died. This was not an accident. This was a choice. The final devastating blow, the confirmation of a cruelty so profound it defied understanding, came that night. I was lying in the dark of my bleak motel room, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, a habit I had picked up to feel connected to my daughter's distant world. I opened my Instagram app, and there was a new post from Naomi, uploaded just a few hours earlier. It was a series of bright, happy photos. The first showed Naomi and David beaming, holding their newborn son. The next few showed a group of their smiling, stylish friends, all taking turns holding the baby, cooing over him. The photos were taken in a beautifully decorated nursery, a room of soft blues and gentle whites. It was a picture of perfect modern parenthood. The caption read, "First week with our little one. So much love, 2 hearts, so blessed to be surrounded by our amazing village." I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to reconcile the joyful images with the cold reality of my motel room. Her village, her amazing village, had room for all of these smiling strangers, but it had no room for her own mother. And then I understood. With a clarity that was as painful as a shard of glass in my heart, I understood. I looked at the people in the photos, at their expensive, understated clothes, at the perfectly minimalist decor of the nursery. And I looked at myself, a woman who wore her heritage as a vibrant, unapologetic statement. I was not one of them. I did not fit into their curated, beige-toned world. It wasn't that it was a hectic time. It was that she was ashamed of me. My authentic African presence would have ruined their perfectly composed picture. I was a liability to the brand of sleek modern success she was so desperate to project. They didn't want their new influential friends to meet their ethnic mother who had just stepped off a plane from Ghana. They wanted to introduce their son to their world, and I was not a part of it. I clicked through the photos again. I saw my son-in-law, David, smiling as he accepted a gift from a friend. I saw my daughter, Naomi, my own flesh and blood, looking radiant and happy, surrounded by people who were not her family, having completely and successfully erased the one person who had given her everything. The pain was no longer just grief. It was a cold, hard, and clarifying rage. The businesswoman in me, The woman who had built an empire on the very textiles and traditions my daughter was so ashamed of began to stir. The CEO awakened. My sister was right. I was Alma Asante. And I would not be refused. I would not be returned to sender. They thought they had solved a problem by hiding me away. They had no idea they had just started a war. And it was a war they were not equipped to win. The rage I felt that night in the motel room did not burn itself out. It cooled, clarified, and settled into a core of pure, unadulterated resolve. The grieving mother was put aside. The CEO took her place. I had not built an international textile empire by weeping over setbacks. I had built it by seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles, by being smarter, tougher, and more strategic than my competitors. My daughter and her husband had just declared themselves my competitors. It was a foolish, foolish move. The next morning, I did not book a flight home to Accra with my tail between my legs. I made a series of phone calls. The first was to American Express, requesting a suite at the St. Regis Hotel in Buckhead. The second was to my bank in Accra, arranging for a significant transfer of capital to my American account. The third was to a high-end car service. I checked out of the dingy airport motel, leaving the stench of despair and disinfectant behind. An hour later, I was sweeping into the marble-floored lobby of the St. Regis, a world of quiet luxury and impeccable service. The concierge did not look at me with pity. He looked at me with the deference reserved for a woman of means. As I settled into my magnificent suite, with its panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline, I felt the balance of power begin to shift. I was no longer a stranded traveler. I was a player, and I was setting up the board. My strategy was simple. My daughter was ashamed of my authentic African identity, viewing it as a liability to her sleek, modern brand. I would prove to her that my heritage, the very thing she was so desperate to hide, was in fact an asset of immense value. An asset she was about to desperately want and be denied. I began to make calls not to my daughter but to my business contacts. I let it be known through a mutual acquaintance in the Atlanta international trade community that I, Alma Asante of Asante Textiles, was in town for a few weeks, exploring potential investment opportunities for a new American venture. The news, as I knew it would, traveled quickly through the city's elite circles. It took less than a week. The call came not from Naomi but from David. His voice, when I answered, was a smooth, carefully calibrated mixture of surprise, feigned concern, and underlying greed. Alma, is that you? We've been so worried. Naomi's text. There was a misunderstanding. The baby had a health scare. We were in a panic. We weren't thinking straight. We heard you were still in town. Why didn't you call us? The lies were so transparent, so clumsy, I almost felt a flicker of pity for him. Almost. I have been occupied with business, I said, my voice cool and professional, the voice I used for negotiations. Business? He asked, the interest in his voice sharpening. That's fantastic. What kind of business? I am considering opportunities in the luxury home goods market, I replied, dangling the bait. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Well, that's an incredible coincidence, he said, his voice now electric with a new energy. Naomi and we've had this idea for years. A passion project. Something that would really honor her heritage. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Oh, I said, my voice betraying nothing. Do tell. He launched into a pitch. They wanted to start a high-end online lifestyle brand. It would sell curated African goods, art, decor, textiles, to an affluent American market. It would be beautiful, minimalist, authentic, but accessible. They had the vision, the branding expertise, the connections. All they lacked was an initial investment. And an authentic supply chain. We have to meet Alma, he said, his voice urgent. You have to hear our presentation. This could be huge. For all of us. I am available to meet tomorrow afternoon. In my suite, I said, and gave him the address of the St. Regis. The next day they arrived at my suite, their faces a perfect picture of contrition and ambition. Naomi rushed to hug me, her embrace stiff and awkward. Mother, I am so sorry, she whispered. I was so overwhelmed. I never meant to hurt you. I did not hug her back. I simply patted her arm. Let us talk business, I said, gesturing for them to sit on the plush velvet sofa. They launched into their presentation. It was slick, professional, and utterly soulless. They had mood boards, market projections, branding mock-ups. The company name they had chosen was OAK. It stood, they explained, for Origin African Concepts. They spoke of monetizing authenticity and leveraging heritage for a modern consumer. They were speaking of my life, my culture, my art as if it were a commodity, a natural resource to be mined and sold. I listened patiently, my face an unreadable mask. When they finished, they looked at me, their eyes shining with a desperate, greedy hope. The concept has potential, I said, my voice measured. But your sourcing is weak and your understanding of the product is superficial. You are selling a story, but you do not own the story. That's why we need you. Naomi jumped in. Your connections, you would be our partner. I am not interested in being a partner, I said quietly. If I am to be involved, I will be the primary investor. And I will set the terms. They exchanged a quick, triumphant look. They thought they had won. They saw me as a sentimental old woman, an easy mark who would pour her money into her daughter's dream project out of love and guilt. They had no idea they were negotiating with a shark. The negotiations took place over the following week in the formal sitting area of my hotel suite. I was no longer their mother. I was a formidable business partner, and I made sure they felt the shift in every interaction. I insisted on my own legal team, a top-tier corporate law firm from Atlanta, to draft the partnership agreement. David, with his background in private equity, tried to push back, suggesting his own lawyers. My investment requires my own counsel, I stated flatly, ending the discussion. The trap was in the details, buried in the dense 100-page document that my lawyers drew up. Blinded by the prospect of a 7-figure investment and operating under the condescending assumption that their old-fashioned mother from Ghana wouldn't understand the complexities of American corporate law, Naomi and David barely skimmed the fine print. They were focused on their titles, CEO and Chief Marketing Officer, and their generous salaries, which were clearly stipulated. They missed the clauses I had instructed my lawyers to make ironclad. The agreement stipulated that while they would be the public faces and day-to-day managers of OAK, my entity, Asante Textiles, would retain a 75% majority ownership stake. It gave me ultimate brand control, final say on all sourcing and product decisions, and most importantly, it contained a key person dissolution clause. This clause stated that if the managing partners, Naomi and David, were found to have acted in a way that brought disrepute upon the brand's core values of authenticity and heritage, I, as the majority owner, had the unilateral right to dissolve their partnership, terminate their employment, and seize all company assets, including the brand name and intellectual property. It was a loaded gun, and I had just handed it to them, knowing their own character would eventually force them to pull the trigger. They signed the documents in my suite, the mood celebratory. To OAK. David toasted with a glass of sparkling water. To the future. To heritage, I replied quietly, my eyes meeting Naomi's over the rim of my glass. She looked away. The business launched 3 months later. And it was a staggering, immediate success. My connections provided them with access to the most brilliant artisans in Ghana. My reputation for quality gave the brand an instant veneer of authenticity that no marketing campaign could buy. OAK, Origin African Concepts, became the new darling of the lifestyle world. It was featured in design magazines and on influential blogs. Naomi and David became the public faces of this new chic Afro-modern aesthetic. They gave interviews where they spoke passionately about their deep connection to their African roots, about their desire to honor the artisans of their homeland. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost poetic. They were selling the very culture they were ashamed of, and they were getting rich doing it. They hosted lavish parties, drove new cars, and moved into an even larger, more opulent home. They were on top of the world, their success built on the foundation of my capital and the authenticity they had so recently scorned. I remained in the background, the silent majority partner. I managed the supply chain from my Atlanta penthouse, which I had now leased. I ensured the quality of the products, and I watched them. I watched as their arrogance grew with their success. I watched as they began to truly believe their own PR, seeing themselves not as the beneficiaries of my life's work, but as brilliant visionaries in their own right. They were becoming more and more comfortable as the public face of a heritage they had privately rejected. They were walking deeper and deeper into the trap I had set. The anniversary of their launch was approaching, and I knew it was time. The lesson was about to begin. The one-year anniversary party for OAK was the pinnacle of their success, the ultimate validation of the image they had so carefully crafted. They hosted it at a chic industrial art gallery in West Midtown Atlanta. The space was filled with the city's most influential people: magazine editors, interior designers, socialites, and investors. The air buzzed with success. Projections of their sleek product photos flashed on the white brick walls. Waiters circulated with champagne and African-inspired hors d'oeuvres. At the center of it all stood Naomi and David, glowing, triumphant, accepting congratulations. They were the king and queen of this new, curated African world. I arrived late, a quiet, regal presence in a simple but exquisitely made gown of deep blue Asante textile. I was no longer the stranded grandmother from the airport. I was the silent, powerful investor, the source of all this success. I watched them from a distance, my heart a strange mixture of sorrow and steel. I saw my daughter, so beautiful, so successful, so completely lost. This was not just an act of revenge. It was a painful, necessary act of reclamation. A final, desperate attempt to teach a lesson that should have been learned long ago. At the height of the party, David tapped a glass for attention. He and Naomi took to a small stage at the front of the room. They thanked their guests, their team, their amazing partners. They spoke of their vision, their passion, their incredible journey. It was a flawless performance. When they finished, to a round of thunderous applause, David said, "And now we'd like to invite the heart and soul of this company, our primary investor and the woman whose wisdom has guided us, my mother-in-law, Alma Asante, to say a few words." He smiled at me, a confident, magnanimous smile. He was presenting me as a prop, the wise, folksy elder who would add a touch of authentic charm to their modern success story. He had no idea he was handing me the microphone for his own execution. I walked to the stage, my steps slow and deliberate. The room fell silent. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces. And then I looked at my daughter. "Good evening," I began, my voice calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "1 year ago, my daughter and son-in-law came to me with a brilliant idea: to build a brand based on the principles of authenticity and heritage. I was so moved by their vision that I agreed to invest. But my investment came with terms." I saw a flicker of confusion in Naomi's eyes. David's smile tightened. "Our contract, the one upon which this entire company is built," I continued, my voice as cool and as sharp as a lawyer's argument, "contains a key person dissolution clause. It states that if the managing partners are found to have acted in a way that brings disrepute upon the brand's core values, I, as the majority owner, have the right to dissolve their partnership and assume full control of all company assets." A stunned silence fell over the room. The celebratory atmosphere evaporated. "1 year and 2 weeks ago," I said, my gaze now locked on my daughter, "I flew from Accra to this city to meet my first grandchild. I was left stranded at the airport. I was told via text message that it was not a good time. I was refused. My gifts were refused. I was hidden away because my authentic African presence was a liability to the image my daughter wanted to project." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Naomi's face was ashen. She looked like she might faint. "You cannot sell authenticity when you are ashamed of its source," I declared, my voice ringing with the authority of a queen. "You cannot be the face of a heritage you have rejected. Your actions have brought disrepute upon the very foundation of this brand. Therefore, as of this moment, I am exercising my legal right. I am dissolving your partnership. I am terminating your employment. This company, its assets, its brand, and its future are now under my sole control." I then looked directly at my daughter, my voice softening almost imperceptibly, the lesson now directed only at her. "This company is my heritage, Naomi. It is the work of my ancestors, the skill of my people. You are not fired forever. You are on a leave of absence. A leave of absence until you have done the work to understand the value of who you are and where you come from. When you are ready to introduce me to your friends as your mother, not as a liability, you may reapply for an entry-level position. The lesson begins now." I stepped down from the stage into a room of stunned, absolute silence. The party was over. Their dream was over. The story ends not with their ruin, but with the possibility of redemption, a choice that is now solely my daughter's to make. I am now the CEO of the rebranded Asante Textiles of Atlanta. The company is more successful than ever, its story of authenticity now imbued with a powerful, undeniable truth. I leave you with this image. Me, Ama Asante, sitting not in a lonely motel room, but in a beautiful corner office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. And on my desk is a single framed photograph. It is not of my daughter's perfect family. It is a picture of my grandchild, a picture sent to me by a repentant David, a first tentative step on a long, humbling road. The door to my forgiveness is not closed, but it must be earned. And the price of entry is the one thing my daughter threw away so carelessly: the truth.